In the heart of a bustling city, surrounded by towering buildings and endless traffic, stood an old but lively school. The corridors buzzed with the chatter of students from all kinds of backgrounds, some rich, some poor, some dreaming big, others just trying to get by. Among them was Ravi, a man in his late 30s who worked as the school janitor. Though he didn't teach or sit in classrooms like the rest, Ravi was an essential part of the school's daily rhythm. Every morning, before the sun rose high enough to warm the cold concrete floors, Ravi would arrive at the school gates carrying his mop, broom, and bucket. His clothes were simple, a faded shirt tucked into trousers held up by a worn-out belt, and his hands bore the marks of years spent cleaning dirt and grime. Yet despite his modest appearance, there was something special about Ravi. It wasn't just the way he kept the hallways spotless or how he greeted every student with a smile. It was the kindness that radiated from him, even when no one was watching. Ravi's life outside the school was far from easy. He lived alone in a tiny rented room on the outskirts of the city, where the walls were thin and the nights were often filled with the sounds of honking cars and barking dogs. Money was tight, and most days his meals consisted of bread, lentils, and whatever vegetables he could afford from the local market. But Ravi never complained. Instead, he found joy in little things: the laughter of children playing during recess, the smell of chalk dust lingering in the air after class, and the quiet moments when he could listen to teachers explaining lessons through slightly opened doors. You see, Ravi had once been a student himself. Long ago, he had dreams of becoming an engineer, building bridges and solving problems that seemed impossible to others. He loved math and science, spending hours poring over textbooks borrowed from friends. But life had other plans for him. When his father fell ill, Ravi dropped out of school to work and support his family. Those dreams of studying engineering slowly faded away, replaced by the harsh realities of survival. Still, deep down, he couldn't let go of his love for learning. Even now, as he swept the floors or wiped down desks, Ravi's ears would perk up whenever a teacher began discussing equations or theories. In those stolen moments, he felt connected to the world he had left behind. The students at the school didn't pay much attention to Ravi. To many of them, he was just the janitor, someone whose job was to clean up after them. Some barely acknowledged his presence, while others nodded politely if their paths crossed in the hallway. But Ravi didn't mind. He understood that being invisible came with the job, and truthfully, he preferred it that way. It gave him the freedom to observe people without judgment, to notice things others might overlook. One particular morning, as Ravi mopped near the examination hall, he overheard snippets of conversation between a group of students. They were talking about the upcoming math test, not with excitement or nervousness, but with smug confidence. One boy boasted about hiding cheat sheets inside his pencil case, while another described a clever signaling system they'd devised to share answers. Ravi listened silently, shaking his head at their carelessness. Cheating wasn't new to him. He'd seen plenty of students try it over the years. But this time, something felt different. Amidst the chatter, Ravi noticed a girl sitting quietly at her desk, scribbling notes furiously in preparation for the exam. Her name was Priya, and though she wasn't particularly loud or noticeable, Ravi had always admired her determination. She came from a humble background, relying on scholarships to stay in school, and worked twice as hard as anyone else to prove herself. Unlike the boastful students around her, Priya took her studies seriously, treating each assignment and test as a stepping stone toward her dream of becoming an engineer. As the group continued plotting their schemes, one of the boys nudged his friend and pointed toward Priya. "Hey, why don't we ask her to help us? She's smart enough to figure out the tough questions," he said with a sly grin. Ravi froze mid-mop, his grip tightening on the handle. Something about the tone of their voices made his stomach churn. He glanced at Priya, who seemed oblivious to their conversation, and wondered what they might do if she refused to cooperate. Little did Ravi know, this seemingly ordinary day would soon turn into something extraordinary, not just for Priya, but for him as well. The next day, the atmosphere in the examination hall was tense. Rows of students sat silently at their desks, pencils poised and eyes glued to the papers in front of them. The room smelled faintly of ink and polished wood, a mix that always reminded Ravi of his own school days filled with hope and dreams he had long since tucked away. As usual, he moved quietly around the edges of the room, sweeping up stray bits of paper or straightening chairs that had been pushed aside. No one paid him much attention. To the students, he was just part of the background, like the hum of the ceiling fan or the ticking clock on the wall. But today, Ravi's focus wasn't entirely on cleaning. His mind kept drifting back to what he'd overheard the previous day. The careless whispers about cheating, the pointed glances toward Priya. He couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling that something bad was brewing. Out of the corner of his eye, he watched her carefully. She looked calm but serious, her brow furrowed as she worked through each problem on the test paper. There was no trace of fear or hesitation in her movements, only quiet determination. It made Ravi proud, though. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because he saw a bit of himself in her, a person unwilling to take shortcuts even when life felt overwhelming. As the minutes ticked by, the silence in the hall began to feel heavier. Then, without warning, trouble struck. A group of boys sitting near Priya suddenly erupted into loud whispers and snickers. One of them leaned over and tapped her shoulder. "Hey," he said, his voice low but insistent. "Can you give us a hand here? Just tell us the answers for question 5. Priya didn't look up. She continued writing, pretending not to hear him. But the boy wasn't done. He nudged her again, harder this time. "Come on, don't act so stuck up. You're good at this stuff, right? Help us out." By now, a few heads had turned in their direction. Some students smirked, amused by the disruption, while others rolled their eyes, annoyed at the distraction. Priya finally glanced up, her expression firm. "I'm not helping anyone cheat," she said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "Do your own work." For a moment there was silence. Then one of the boys, clearly frustrated by her refusal, snatched her water bottle from the edge of her desk. Before she could react, he tipped it over, spilling dark blue ink all over her answer sheet. The liquid spread quickly, blotting out entire sections of her neatly written responses. Gasps rippled through the room as Priya stared at the ruined paper, her face pale with shock. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back, trying to stay composed. Ravi froze where he stood, gripping his broom tightly. He knew exactly what this meant for Priya. Losing her scholarship wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a disaster. Without financial aid, she wouldn't be able to afford tuition, and her dream of becoming an engineer would slip further out of reach. The unfairness of it all burned inside him like a flame. How could these boys think they were entitled to ruin someone else's future, just because they wanted an easy way out? The invigilator, seated at the front of the room, hadn't noticed the commotion. He was busy flipping through papers, oblivious to the chaos unfolding behind him. Ravi hesitated for a split second, weighing the risks. If he spoke up, he might lose his job. Nobody expected a janitor to interfere in such matters. It wasn't his place, after all. Yet as he looked at Priya's trembling hands and tear-streaked cheeks, he realized he couldn't stay silent. This wasn't just about her, it was about doing what was right. Taking a deep breath, Ravi stepped forward. His heart pounded as every pair of eyes in the room turned toward him. For once, he wasn't invisible. "Sir," he called out, his voice steady despite the nerves twisting in his stomach. "I need to report something important." The invigilator raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "What is it?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. Ravi gestured toward the group of boys. "These students deliberately sabotaged her work. I saw everything. They knocked over her water bottle and ruined her answer sheet because she refused to help them cheat." Ripple of murmurs swept through the room as the accused boys shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them tried to protest, but Ravi held his ground. "It's true," he insisted, meeting the invigilator's gaze. "You can ask anyone who saw it happen." The teacher frowned, then turned to Priya. "Is this accurate?" he asked gently. She nodded, still clutching the stained paper in her hands. Her voice barely above a whisper, she confirmed Ravi's account. After a brief discussion, the invigilator announced that Priya would be allowed extra time to rewrite her answers. The boys, meanwhile, were reprimanded and told their actions would be reported to the principal. As the exam resumed, Priya shot Ravi a grateful glance. Though she didn't say anything, her eyes conveyed more than words ever could. Ravi gave her a small nod before retreating to the corner of the room, his heart still racing. He knew he'd done the right thing, but he couldn't help wondering if he'd also put his job, and possibly his livelihood, at risk. Later that evening, as Ravi locked up the school and headed home, he replayed the events of the day in his mind. Helping Priya had felt natural, almost instinctive, but it also left him uneasy. Would people see him differently now? Would they respect him or resent him for speaking up? And most importantly, would Priya truly be okay? Little did Ravi know, his simple act of courage was about to set off a chain reaction that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. The next morning, the school buzzed with whispers about what had happened in the examination hall. News of the incident spread faster than Ravi could have imagined. Students huddled in small groups during breaks, recounting the story with wide eyes and animated gestures. Some praised Priya for standing her ground against the bullies, while others marveled at the janitor who had stepped in to defend her. "Did you hear? That guy actually spoke up," one student said excitedly. "I didn't even know his name before yesterday." For Ravi, the attention was overwhelming and uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being the center of conversation, let alone admiration. As he swept the corridors, he noticed people glancing at him more often than usual. Some smiled warmly, others gave him curious looks, and a few even stopped to thank him. "You did the right thing," one teacher told him as she passed by. "We need more people like you around here." But not everyone reacted positively. A handful of students muttered under their breath, calling him nosy or saying he'd overstepped his boundaries. "It's none of his business," one boy grumbled loud enough for Ravi to hear. "He's just a janitor. What does he know?" Ravi pretended not to notice, keeping his head down and focusing on his work. Deep down, though, the words stung. He reminded himself why he'd intervened, to protect someone who deserved better. But doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Had he made things worse for himself? Priya, meanwhile, found it hard to concentrate. The extra time given by the invigilator had allowed her to rewrite most of her answers, but the memory of the ruined paper haunted her. Every time she thought about how close she'd come to losing everything, her chest tightened. She owed Ravi more than she could ever repay. The gratitude weighed heavily on her heart, and she couldn't stop thinking about how brave he'd been to stand up for her when no one else would. Later that afternoon, after classes ended, Priya mustered the courage to approach Ravi. She found him outside, sweeping leaves near the school gate. His movements were slow and deliberate, almost meditative. When she called out his name softly, he turned, surprised to see her standing there. "Hello?" Priya began, shifting nervously from one foot to the other. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Ravi leaned his broom against the wall and nodded. "Of course," he said kindly. "What is it?" Priya hesitated, unsure where to start. Finally, she blurted out, "Why did you do it? Why did you help me?" Her question caught him off guard. For a moment, Ravi simply stared at her, searching for the right words. Then, with a sigh, he motioned for her to sit on a nearby bench. Once they were both seated, he began to speak. His voice was soft, but steady, carrying the weight of years spent reflecting on life's injustices. "I've been in your shoes," he admitted. "When I was younger, I dreamed of studying engineering. I loved solving problems, building things, but life got in the way. My family needed money, so I dropped out of school to work. Over time, those dreams faded, but I never forgot how much education meant to me. Seeing you reminded me of myself, the determination, the hunger to succeed. I couldn't let anyone take that away from you." Priya listened intently, her eyes filling with tears. "But you risked your job for me," she whispered. "What if they fire you because of this?" Ravi chuckled lightly, though there was a hint of sadness in his laugh. "If they do, then so be it. Sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks. Besides," he added with a reassuring smile, "I trust that good people will always find a way." His words struck a chord deep within Priya. Here was a man who had sacrificed so much yet still believed in fairness and kindness. She felt a surge of determination swelling inside her. If Ravi could fight for what was right despite his struggles, then surely she could do the same. "I want to repay you," Priya said suddenly, surprising even herself. "There has to be something I can do to thank you." Ravi shook his head firmly. "No, child. You don't owe me anything. Just focus on your studies and make the most of this opportunity. That's all the repayment I need." But Priya wasn't convinced. As she walked home that evening, her mind raced with ideas. She knew Ravi wouldn't accept money or gifts. It wasn't his nature. But maybe there was another way to show her gratitude. An idea began to form in her head, vague at first but growing clearer with each step. What if she could share his story with someone who could truly make a difference? Someone powerful enough to change his life? The following day, Priya decided to act. During lunch break, she borrowed a pen and notebook from a friend and began writing. At first, the words came slowly, hesitant and uncertain. But as she poured her thoughts onto the page, her confidence grew. She wrote about Ravi's kindness, his selflessness, and the sacrifices he'd made to help others. She described how he'd risked his livelihood to ensure fairness, not just for her, but for everyone in the exam hall. By the time she finished, her hand ached from gripping the pen too tightly, but she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. That evening, Priya folded the letter neatly and addressed it to Mr. Kapoor, a wealthy alumnus known for supporting underprivileged students. She had heard stories about how he funded scholarships and helped struggling families send their children to school. Though she didn't know him personally, she hoped her words might inspire him to take action. With trembling hands, she dropped the letter into the mailbox outside her house. As she walked back inside, a wave of relief washed over her. Whether or not Mr. Kapoor responded, she had done what she could. Now all she could do was wait. Days turned into weeks, and life at the school returned to its usual rhythm. Ravi continued his duties without complaint, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. People seemed kinder toward him now, offering smiles and hellos more freely than before. Even the teachers who had once treated him as little more than part of the furniture began acknowledging his presence with genuine warmth. Still, Ravi remained cautious. He didn't expect anything dramatic to happen. After all, he was just a janitor doing his job. Yet, deep down, a tiny spark of hope flickered within him. Maybe, just maybe, his actions had planted a seed that would grow into something meaningful. Little did he know, Priya's letter had already begun its journey, traveling far beyond the confines of their small school. And soon, it would reach someone who had the power to transform lives, including Ravi's, in ways he could never have imagined. Weeks passed, and life at the school carried on as usual. The initial buzz surrounding Ravi's bravery had faded into the background, replaced by the routine hustle and bustle of daily activities. Students returned to their studies. Teachers resumed their lessons, and Ravi continued his work with quiet dedication. Though people still greeted him warmly, the intensity of attention had waned. For Ravi, this return to normalcy was both comforting and bittersweet. He appreciated the kindness he now received, but he didn't want anyone to think he'd done what he did for recognition. His actions were driven by a sense of justice, not a desire for praise. Priya, however, couldn't let go of what had happened. Every time she saw Ravi sweeping the hallways or tidying up classrooms, her heart swelled with gratitude and guilt. Gratitude because he had saved her from losing everything. Guilt because she felt powerless to repay him. She often replayed their conversation in her mind, hearing his words echo. "You don't owe me anything. Just focus on your studies and make the most of this opportunity." But no matter how many times she reminded herself of his advice, the feeling lingered. She owed him more than just good grades. She owed him a chance to rewrite his own story. One evening, while sitting at her desk reviewing notes for an upcoming test, Priya found herself distracted. Her gaze drifted to the corner of her room where a framed photograph stood, a picture of her parents smiling proudly on her first day of school. They had sacrificed so much to give her a better future, working long hours and cutting corners wherever they could. Seeing their faces made her realize something important. If they were willing to endure hardships for her sake, shouldn't she do the same for someone else? Especially someone like Ravi, who had given her a second chance without expecting anything in return. The thought reignited the spark of determination that had led her to write the letter weeks ago. She pulled out the notebook where she'd jotted down ideas after sending the letter to Mr. Kapoor. What if there was more she could do? What if she could rally others to support Ravi too? After all, one person's efforts might seem small, but when combined with others, they could create a wave of change. The next morning, Priya arrived at school earlier than usual. Instead of heading straight to class, she wandered toward the library, a place she knew would be quiet and empty at this hour. There, she began drafting another message, not to Mr. Kapoor this time, but to her fellow students. She wanted to share Ravi's story in her own words, hoping it would inspire them to see him not just as a janitor but as a hero. As she wrote, her pen moved quickly across the page, fueled by excitement and purpose. "Dear friends," she started, "I want to tell you about someone extraordinary among us. You may know him as the man who cleans our classrooms and keeps our school beautiful, but there's so much more to him than meets the eye. His name is Ravi, and recently, he risked his job to stand up for fairness during an exam. Because of him, I got a second chance to prove myself. Because of him, we all learned what true courage looks like." She went on to describe how Ravi had intervened when the bullies tried to sabotage her work, emphasizing his selflessness and humility. "He didn't have to step in," she wrote. "In fact, doing so put his livelihood at risk. Yet, he chose to do the right thing anyway. That kind of bravery deserves our respect and admiration. So I'm asking each of you, what can we do to show our gratitude? How can we help someone who has already done so much for us?" When she finished writing, Priya copied the message onto several sheets of paper and pinned them around the school bulletin boards. She also shared it with a few close friends, encouraging them to spread the word. At first, she worried her plea might fall flat. Would anyone care enough to take action? Or would they dismiss it as just another feel-good story? To her surprise, the response was overwhelming. By lunchtime, groups of students gathered near the bulletin boards, reading her message aloud and discussing it animatedly. Some suggested organizing a fundraiser to support Ravi financially. Others proposed nominating him for an award recognizing unsung heroes in the community. Even the teachers joined in, praising Priya for shining a light on someone whose contributions often went unnoticed. But amidst the flurry of ideas, one question kept coming up. What did Ravi truly need? Money? Recognition? Something else entirely? Determined to find out, Priya decided to ask him directly. After school, she approached him as he was cleaning the science lab. "Ravi, sir," she said hesitantly, using the respectful title she'd grown accustomed to calling him. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Ravi paused mid-sweep and turned to face her, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Of course," he replied with a warm smile. "What's on your mind?" Priya took a deep breath before speaking. "Everyone's been talking about what you did. For me, the way you stood up against those bullies. People really admire you and, well, some of us want to do something to thank you properly." Ravi's expression shifted slightly, a mix of surprise and unease crossing his face. "Thank me?" he repeated, shaking his head. "There's no need for that. I only did what anyone should have done." "But we want to," Priya insisted, her voice filled with conviction. "You've inspired so many of us. We just need to know what would help you the most. Is there something you've always wanted but couldn't afford? Or maybe something you wish you could pursue again?" For a moment, Ravi looked away, staring out the window at the fading sunlight. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but heavy with emotion. "There is one thing," he admitted. "Ever since I was young, I dreamed of becoming an engineer. I loved solving problems, building things. But life didn't give me the chance to follow that path. Sometimes late at night I imagine what it would be like to go back to school, to learn everything I missed out on, but..." He trailed off, shrugging. "It's just a dream now. Dreams don't pay bills. Priya's eyes widened. She hadn't expected such a heartfelt confession. Without thinking, she reached out and placed a hand on his arm. "Then let's make it real," she said firmly. "Let's figure out a way to get you back to school. You deserve this, Ravi sir, more than anyone I know." Ravi chuckled softly, though tears glistened in his eyes. "You're stubborn, aren't you?" he teased gently. "But even if you try, it won't be easy. Education costs money, money I don't have." "We'll find a way," Priya promised. "Together." As they parted ways that evening, neither of them realized how far-reaching their conversation would become. Unbeknownst to them, Priya's letter to Mr. Kapoor had already reached its destination, and the wealthy alumnus was preparing to visit the school personally. Meanwhile, whispers of Ravi's dream began spreading beyond the student body, reaching the ears of teachers, parents, and local community leaders. What started as a simple act of kindness was slowly turning into a movement, one that would soon bring 3 luxury cars rolling up to the school gates, carrying a man who believed in giving back to those who gave everything. And for Ravi, whose life had once seemed stuck in monotony, the road ahead was about to take a turn he never saw coming. The days that followed Priya's heartfelt conversation with Ravi brought a wave of energy to the school. Students, teachers, and even parents seemed to rally around the idea of helping him pursue his dream of becoming an engineer. It was as if Ravi's quiet courage had awakened something in everyone, a desire to do more, to be better, to create change where it mattered most. The halls buzzed with excitement as plans were discussed, ideas exchanged, and efforts coordinated. Priya became the unofficial leader of this growing movement. She organized meetings during lunch breaks, inviting anyone interested to join her in brainstorming ways to support Ravi. At first, only a handful of students showed up, but word quickly spread, and soon the small group grew into a sizable gathering. Some suggested organizing fundraisers, bake sales, car washes, or talent shows to raise money for Ravi's education. Others proposed reaching out to local businesses or community organizations for sponsorships. Even the science teacher offered to tutor Ravi in math and physics if he ever decided to enroll in classes. But despite all the enthusiasm, there was one glaring obstacle: finances. While bake sales and donations might cover some costs, they wouldn't come close to funding tuition fees, books, and other expenses required for engineering school. This realization dampened spirits slightly, but Priya refused to let it discourage her. "If we can't solve everything at once," she told the crew, "then let's start small. Every little bit helps." One afternoon, after another lively planning session, Priya sat alone in the library, staring at the pile of notes scattered across the table. Her mind raced with possibilities, but none felt big enough to make a real difference. Then, almost instinctively, her thoughts drifted back to Mr. Kapoor, the wealthy alumnus she'd written 2 weeks ago. She hadn't heard anything from him yet, and though she tried not to dwell on it, part of her wondered if her letter had even reached him. Had he dismissed it as just another plea for help? Or worse, had he never read it at all? As she mulled over these questions, a sudden thought struck her. What if she could amplify her message? What if she didn't stop at writing letters but used every tool available to ensure Ravi's story reached someone who could truly make a difference? With renewed determination, Priya pulled out her phone and opened social media. Typing quickly, she drafted a post detailing Ravi's journey, from his struggles as a student forced to drop out, to his selfless act of standing up for fairness, to his unfulfilled dream of becoming an engineer. She included photos she'd taken discreetly while he worked, capturing moments of him smiling warmly or concentrating intently on his tasks. Before hitting send, she added a simple caption: "Help us give this hero a second chance." Within hours, the post went viral. Friends shared it, classmates commented enthusiastically, and strangers began chiming in with messages of support. Some offered words of encouragement. Others pledged small donations. One parent, whose child attended the school, tagged a local news outlet, urging them to cover the story. By the end of the day, Priya's phone buzzed non-stop with notifications. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were onto something bigger than any of them had imagined. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Priya and the rest of the school, Mr. Kapoor had indeed received her original letter. Sitting in his luxurious office high above the city skyline, he reread the pages, his brow furrowed in deep thought. Though he had funded countless scholarships and supported numerous causes over the years, something about Priya's words resonated with him on a personal level. Perhaps it was the raw honesty of her description, or maybe it was the way she painted Ravi not just as a victim of circumstance, but as a beacon of hope and resilience. Whatever it was, it stirred something inside him, a longing to connect with the humanity behind the story. Curious to learn more, Mr. Kapoor decided to investigate further. He reached out to the school principal, posing as a potential donor interested in contributing to educational initiatives. During their conversation, he casually mentioned Ravi's name, asking if the janitor was well liked among staff and students. To his surprise, the principal responded with glowing praise, recounting recent events involving the exam hall incident and the subsequent buzz surrounding Ravi's bravery. By the end of the call, Mr. Kapoor knew exactly what he wanted to do next. A few days later, Mr. Kapoor made arrangements to visit the school personally. He instructed his assistant to prepare 3 luxury cars, 1 for himself and 2 for members of his foundation team, and set a date for the trip. As they drove through the city streets toward the school, Mr. Kapoor couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. He rarely stepped foot in schools anymore, preferring to handle donations remotely. But this time felt different. This time, he wanted to meet Ravi face to face, to see for himself the man who had inspired so many. Back at the school, no one suspected what was coming. Life continued as usual, with students rushing between classes and teachers preparing lessons for the day. Ravi, too, carried on with his duties, sweeping floors and ensuring everything ran smoothly. If anything, he seemed quieter than before, perhaps sensing that the attention he'd received earlier was beginning to fade. Little did he know, fate had other plans. It was mid-morning when the unmistakable sound of engines roared outside the school gates. Heads turned as 3 sleek, shiny cars pulled up, their polished exteriors gleaming under the bright sunlight. Students gathered near the windows, craning their necks to get a better look. Whispers erupted throughout the building. Who could it be? Why are they here? Teachers paused mid-lesson, equally intrigued by the unusual sight. Moments later, a tall, impeccably dressed man stepped out of the lead car. His presence commanded attention immediately. Dressed in a tailored suit and wearing a warm smile, he walked confidently toward the entrance, flanked by 2 colleagues carrying briefcases. As he approached, the principal hurried out to greet him, shaking his hand warmly and ushering him inside. Students crowded around, eager to catch a glimpse of the visitor. Rumors flew faster than ever. Was he a politician? A celebrity? Someone important, surely. But why had he chosen their school? Inside, the principal led Mr. Kapoor to the main hall, where teachers and senior staff waited anxiously. After exchanging pleasantries, Mr. Kapoor got straight to the point. "I'm here today because I received a letter about someone special," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Someone who embodies the values we should all strive to uphold: kindness, integrity, and resilience. I'd like to meet this person now." For a moment, confusion rippled through the room. Who could he possibly mean? Before anyone could guess, the principal gestured toward the door. "Please bring him in," she said softly, and then, to everyone's astonishment, Ravi entered the hall. Clad in his usual faded shirt and trousers, holding his broom in one hand, he looked completely out of place amidst the polished furniture and formal attire. Yet, there was an undeniable dignity in the way he carried himself, a quiet strength that silenced the room instantly. Mr. Kapoor rose from his seat and extended a hand. "You must be Ravi," he said warmly. "It's an honor to finally meet you." Ravi blinked in disbelief, unsure how to respond. "Sir," he stammered, glancing around at the sea of faces watching him. I don't understand." "What is this about?" Mr. Kapoor smiled kindly. Let's just say your story has touched a lot of hearts, including mine, and I'm here to offer you something you've earned, a chance to chase your dreams. As the weight of those words sank in, tears welled up in Ravi's eyes. He had spent years believing his dreams were lost forever. Now, standing in front of this influential man surrounded by people who believed in him, he dared to hope again. Hope that maybe, just maybe, life still held surprises worth believing in.